The message came on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Helen Carter was drinking her third cup of coffee when her computer screen lit up with numbers and patterns she had never seen before. She worked at the big radio telescope in Nevada, listening to space every day. Most days she heard nothing but static and noise. Today was different. Her hands shook as she typed commands into her keyboard. The signal was real. It was not a mistake. Someone out in space was sending a message, and that someone was not human. Helen picked up her phone and called her boss. Within 1 hour, every space agency on Earth knew about the signal. Within 3 hours, the president was in a meeting room with the most important people in the government. The signal took days to decode. Scientists around the world worked together, using math and physics to understand what the aliens were saying. When they finally translated the message, everyone fell silent. The message was simple and terrifying. The aliens called themselves the Kalari. They lived on a planet far away, so far that light from their sun took 847 years to reach Earth. They were dying. Another alien race, something called the Vrek swarm, was killing them. The Vreks ate everything on every planet they found. They did not talk. They did not trade. They only consumed and moved on to the next world. The Kalari had 30 days left before the Vreks would destroy their last cities. They were not fighters. They were artists and scientists and builders. They had never made weapons for war. They did not know how to fight back, so they sent out a message to anyone who might hear, begging for help. Admiral Victor Chen sat in a room full of military officers and scientists. On the big screen in front of them, pictures showed the Kalari world. It looked beautiful. Blue oceans, green lands, cities that looked like they were made of crystal and light. Then the screen showed what the Vreks had done to other Kalari colonies. Those places were dead. Nothing but ash and bare rock remained. Dr. Lisa Grant stood up to speak. She was a scientist who studied alien life, though until today, alien life had only been a theory. She explained what they knew about the Kalari. They were peaceful people who had built a perfect society over hundreds of years. They shared everything. They had no wars, no crime, no hunger. They spent their time making art, exploring science, and being happy. Then she showed them what they knew about the Vreks. The pictures made everyone in the room feel sick. The Vreks looked like giant insects, 8 feet tall with hard shells covering their bodies. They had sharp claws that could cut through metal. They spit acid that melted almost anything. Worst of all, they worked as one mind. Thousands of creatures thinking and acting as a single entity. They were the perfect killing machines. Commander Jake Harrison studied the tactical information. He had fought in battles on Mars and in the asteroid belt. He knew war. As he looked at the Vreks data, he realized something important. The Vreks had never fought anyone who fought back with real military force. The Kalari had tried to defend themselves with mining tools and improvised barriers. Those things were useless against the Vreks, but humans had real weapons. Humans had trained soldiers. Humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years. Humans knew how to kill. The biggest problem was distance. The Kalari planet was 847 light-years away. With normal rockets, it would take thousands of years to get there. The Kalari would be long dead before any help could arrive. It seemed impossible. Then Dr. Sarah Blake spoke up. She was a physicist who worked on experimental engines. She had been developing something called the Morrison drive. It was based on old theories about bending space itself. Instead of flying through space the normal way, a ship with the Morrison drive would squeeze space in front of it and stretch space behind it. The ship would surf on a wave of bent space-time, moving faster than light. The problem was that the drive had never been tested. It might work. It might blow up. It might tear a hole in reality itself. Nobody knew for sure. But it was the only chance the Kalari had. The president made a decision. Earth would help. Operation Deathworld was approved that same day. The name came from the Kalari database. According to their measurements, Earth was one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. The gravity was heavy. The weather was violent. The animals were aggressive. The diseases were deadly. Even the plants were often poisonous. Most aliens would die on Earth within days. The Kalari had a special classification for planets like Earth. They called them Deathworlds. Only the strongest, toughest species could survive on a death world. And humans had not just survived. They had become the dominant species on their death world. If anyone could fight the Vreks, it would be humans. Admiral Chen walked through the space station that orbited Earth. Engineers were already working on the ship that would carry the mission. The ship was called the Unity. It was new, built for deep space exploration. Now it would become a warship. The Unity was big enough to carry 300 people plus weapons, supplies, and the experimental Morrison drive. Dr. Blake and her team worked day and night installing the drive. It took up a huge amount of space inside the ship. It needed incredible amounts of power to run. One small mistake in the calculations could destroy the entire ship. Meanwhile, Commander Harrison picked his team. He did not ask for volunteers. He looked for the best soldiers in the human military. He found Marines who had fought in space battles. He found pilots who could fly in any condition. He found engineers who could fix anything. He found doctors who had saved lives in impossible situations. Lieutenant Kate Morgan was one of the first people Harrison chose. She was 26 years old and the best sniper in the Space Marines. She could hit targets from incredibly far away. She could shoot in zero gravity. She could shoot in storms. She never missed. When Harrison asked her why she wanted to go, she said that somebody had to help and she knew how to shoot. Sergeant Ryan Torres was another soldier Harrison picked. Torres had been an Army Ranger before joining the Space Force. He was an expert in explosives and close combat. Once on one of Saturn's moons, a tunnel collapsed on him and 3 other soldiers. Everyone thought they were dead. Torres dug them all out with a broken arm and carried them to safety. He simply refused to give up. Dr. Amy Phillips led the medical team. She had worked on Mars for 5 years, treating colonists for everything from radiation sickness to new diseases. She packed every medicine and medical tool she could think of. She had a feeling this mission would need everything she brought and more. The weapons were loaded onto the Unity. Railguns that fired metal slugs faster than bullets, plasma rifles that could melt steel, missiles with nuclear warheads, explosives of every kind. Humanity had spent its entire history perfecting the art of killing. Now those weapons would be used to save an alien race. 3 weeks into the preparation, another message came from the Kalari. This one was shorter and more desperate. The Vrex had reached their outer colonies. Millions were already dead. The survivors were fleeing to the main cities, but those cities would not hold for long. They had 20 days left, maybe less. The message ended with a plea. Please hurry, we are afraid. Commander Harrison showed the message to his soldiers. He did not need to give a speech. Everyone understood what was at stake. Billions of innocent people were about to die. An entire civilization would be erased from the universe, unless Earth could help them in time. On the 28th day, Dr. Blake finished her work. The Morrison drive was ready. She had checked every calculation 3 times. It should work, probably. Maybe. She tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Unity. Through the window, he could see Earth below. It was beautiful. Blue oceans, white clouds, green and brown land. It was a death world, but it was home. And the children of that death world were about to travel to another star to fight monsters. He gave the order to activate the Morrison drive. The ship began to hum. Reality bent. The stars stretched into lines, and the Unity disappeared, racing across the galaxy faster than light itself. The journey through bent space was unlike anything the crew had experienced. The Unity vibrated constantly, making a deep humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Outside the windows, space looked wrong. Stars stretched into long lines of light. Colors appeared that human eyes had never seen before. Some crew members felt sick. Others felt dizzy. But everyone kept working. Dr. Sarah Blake stayed in the engine room watching her instruments carefully. The Morrison drive was holding together, but barely. She could see stress forming in the metal parts. She could hear strange noises that worried her. Every hour she checked and rechecked her calculations. If the drive failed while they were in warp, the ship would be torn apart. Everyone on board would die instantly, but the drive kept running. Hour after hour, day after day, the Unity raced across 847 light-years of space in just 16 days. Lieutenant Kate Morgan spent the journey training. She ran through combat drills in the gym. She practiced shooting in the firing range. She studied everything she could learn about the Vrex. Know your enemy, her instructors had always said. The more you know, the better you can fight. The Vrex were fast and strong. Their shells were hard enough to stop most bullets. They could survive in almost any environment. They hunted in groups, coordinating their attacks through their hive mind. On paper, they were the perfect killers, but Kate had killed perfect killers before. On Mars, she had fought rebel soldiers who wore advanced armor and used AI targeting systems. She had won because she was smarter and faster. The Vrex might be tough, but they were not invincible. Everything could be killed if you shot it in the right place. Sergeant Ryan Torres spent his time checking the explosives. He had brought everything from small grenades to large demolition charges. If the team needed to blow something up, Torres would make it happen. He organized his equipment carefully, labeling everything so he could find what he needed quickly in the chaos of battle. Dr. Amy Phillips set up her medical bay. She had beds for 20 patients, though she hoped she would not need them all. She organized medicines, bandages, and surgical tools. She also studied Kalari biology, using the data from their messages. Their bodies were different from human bodies, but pain was still pain, and injuries were still injuries. She would do her best to save everyone, human and alien alike. Commander Jake Harrison spent most of his time on the bridge with Admiral Victor Chen. They studied maps of the Kalari system and planned their attack strategy. They had to assume the worst. The Vrex would control the space around the planet. They would have forces on the ground. The humans would be outnumbered by at least 10 to 1, maybe more. But humans had advantages. They had better weapons. They had military training. Most importantly, they had experience. Every soldier on the Unity had fought in real combat. They knew how to stay calm under fire. They knew how to adapt when plans fell apart. They knew how to win. On the 14th day of the journey, they received another message from the Kalari. The signal was weak and full of static. Coordinator Veln appeared on the screen, looking exhausted and frightened. The Vrex had begun their final assault. The outer defenses had fallen. Enemy forces were inside the cities. The Kalari were fighting with everything they had, but it was not enough. Veln estimated they had 3 days left. Maybe 4. Then it would be over. The message ended with a simple statement. We know you are trying to reach us. Even if you arrive too late, thank you for trying. At least we will not die alone. Admiral Chen sent a response immediately. Hold on, we are almost there. Do not give up. The message would take hours to reach the Kalari system, but he wanted them to know that help was coming. On the 16th day, the Unity dropped out of warp at the edge of the Kalari system. The transition back to normal space was violent. The ship shuddered. Alarms blared. Several crew members fell down, but they had made it. They were here. The first thing they saw was fire. Space stations orbiting the Kalari homeworld were burning. Vrex bioships swarmed around them like insects around meat. The stations were breaking apart, spilling atmosphere and debris into the void. The second thing they saw was the Vrex fleet. Thousands of ships filled the space around the planet. Each ship looked organic, like it had been grown instead of built. They pulsed with a sickly green light, moving in perfect coordination. The sight was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The third thing they saw was the planet itself. Kalara Prime was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. But even from space, they could see the damage. Huge areas of land were blackened and smoking. Cities that should have glowed with light were dark. The Vrex were winning. Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the planet. The response came within seconds. A Kalari face appeared on the screen. They looked similar to birds, with large eyes, delicate features, and skin covered in tiny iridescent scales. This was Coordinator Veln, the leader of the Kalari defense. Veln stared at the humans in shock. They had not really believed help would come. The distress signal had been a desperate hope, nothing more. But here was a ship from across the galaxy, crewed by aliens that Veln had never seen before. Aliens that had come to fight. Through translators, Veln explained the situation. It was bad. The Vrex controlled orbit and were bombing cities from space. Ground forces had landed on every continent. The Kalari military, what little they had, was barely holding the capital city. They had maybe 2 days left before complete collapse. Commander Harrison studied the tactical display. The situation was worse than they had feared. But it was not hopeless. He divided his forces. 100 Marines would drop directly to the planet's surface to help defend the cities. The other 200 would stay on the Unity and engage the Vrex fleet in space. Lieutenant Kate Morgan was in the first dropship. She checked her rifle one last time, then secured herself in her seat. Around her, other Marines did the same. Nobody spoke. There was nothing to say. They all knew what they had to do. The dropship detached from the Unity and began its descent. As they entered the atmosphere, Kate could see the devastation below. Kalari cities that must have been beautiful were now ruins. Fires burned everywhere. Vrex bioships flew through the air, hunting for survivors. The dropship landed hard in what used to be a park. The ramp dropped and Kate was the first one out. Her rifle was already at her shoulder, scanning for targets. She spotted 3 Vrex soldiers running toward their position. They were huge, at least 8 feet tall, with shells that looked like black armor. Kate fired 3 times. 3 shots. 3 kills. The Vrex dropped to the ground. Their shells cracked open by the high-powered rounds. Around her, the other Marines opened fire. The sound of human weapons echoed across the battlefield. The Vrex had never encountered weapons like these. Kalari mining lasers barely scratched their shells. Human railguns punched straight through. Kalari barriers melted under Vrex acid. Human armor shrugged it off. The Vrex were used to easy prey. Humans were anything but easy. Kalari soldiers watched in amazement as the humans fought. These strange aliens moved with incredible speed and precision. They did not panic. They did not retreat. They simply advanced, killing everything in their path. It was like watching a force of nature, unstoppable and deadly. Sergeant Ryan Torres led his squad into a building that the Vrex had occupied. It was a Kalari school. Children's drawings still hung on the walls. Torres felt anger rise in his chest. The Vrex would pay for this. He planted explosives at the building's support columns, evacuated his team, and triggered the detonation. The building collapsed, crushing dozens of Vrex under tons of rubble. In space, the Unity was engaging the Vrex fleet. Admiral Chen commanded the battle with cold efficiency. The Unity's railguns fired in steady patterns, targeting the largest Vrex ships first. Each shot that hit was like a hammer blow tearing through organic armor. The Vrex tried to swarm the Unity, surrounding it with hundreds of smaller ships. But the Unity's point defense systems were designed by humans who knew how dangerous space combat could be. Automated guns tracked and destroyed anything that got too close. Missiles intercepted incoming projectiles. The Unity was a fortress and the Vrex could not crack it. On the ground, the human Marines linked up with Kalari defenders. The Kalari were amazed by the humans. They were shorter than Kalari but much stronger. Their eyes could track fast-moving targets that Kalari eyes could barely see. Their reflexes were incredibly quick, and they fought with a skill that seemed impossible. A young Kalari soldier named Trell found himself fighting beside Lieutenant Kate Morgan. He watched as she took down a Vrex warrior with a single shot through its eye. The creature had been moving so fast that Trell had barely seen it. But Kate had tracked it easily and killed it instantly. After the fight, Trell asked Kate how humans were so good at this. Kate looked at the young alien and gave a simple answer. Humans came from a death world. Everything on Earth tried to kill them. Big animals, tiny diseases, other humans. They had spent millions of years learning to survive. Fighting was not something they were good at. Fighting was what they were. For the first time since the Vrex arrived, Trell felt hope. Maybe his people would survive after all. The battle raged for 3 days straight. Human Marines fought without rest, pushing the Vrex back street by street, building by building. They used every trick they had learned from centuries of human warfare. They set ambushes. They flanked enemy positions. They coordinated their attacks with devastating precision. The Vrex were confused. They had conquered dozens of worlds before this one. Every species they encountered either ran away or died quickly. But these humans did neither. They stood their ground. They fought back. And they were winning. Lieutenant Kate Morgan had stopped counting her kills after the first day. Numbers did not matter. What mattered was pushing forward and protecting the Kalari. She moved through the ruined city like a ghost, her rifle always ready. Other Marines called her the Shadow because enemies never saw her before she shot them. On the second day, Kate's squad was sent to rescue civilians trapped in a hospital. The building was surrounded by Vrex warriors. Kate counted at least 30 enemies between her team and the hospital entrance. Bad odds for anyone else? For Kate and her squad, it was just another mission. They attacked from 3 directions at once. Kate took position on a rooftop and started shooting. Each shot dropped 1 Vrex. Below, Sergeant Ryan Torres and his team rushed the main entrance, throwing grenades and firing their weapons. The Vrex turned to face this new threat, which was exactly what Kate wanted. She picked them off one by one as they exposed themselves. Within 10 minutes, all 30 Vrex were dead. The Marines entered the hospital and found 200 Kalari hiding inside. Doctors, nurses, patients, and civilians who had fled there for safety. They were weak from hunger and terrified but alive. Dr. Amy Phillips arrived with the medical evacuation team. She immediately started treating the wounded. Some injuries were from Vrex attacks. Others were from building collapses or burns. Amy worked quickly and efficiently, saving lives with practiced skill. Her team carried the most seriously injured to drop ships that would take them to safety. One of the Kalari patients, an elderly scholar named Sora, grabbed Amy's hand as she worked. Through a translator device, Sora thanked her, not just for the medical help, but for coming at all. The Kalari had sent their message without much hope. They thought they would die alone, but humanity had heard their cry and crossed the galaxy to help. Amy squeezed Sora's hand gently and promised that nobody would die today. She meant to keep that promise. In space, Admiral Victor Chen was fighting his own battle. The Unity had destroyed dozens of Rex bioships, but more kept coming. The Rex fleet seemed endless. Chen knew they could not win by simply killing enemy ships one at a time. They needed to do something dramatic, something that would end the battle quickly. Chen studied the Vrex fleet patterns carefully. He noticed something interesting. All the Vrex ships moved in perfect coordination. It was like watching a dance where everyone knew the steps. That meant they were being controlled by something. Somewhere in that fleet was a command node, a central brain directing all the others. Chen scanned the enemy fleet with every sensor the Unity had. Finally, he found it. Deep in the center of the Vrex formation was a massive organic structure. It was not really a ship. It was more like a giant brain floating in space. All the other Vrex ships were connected to it through some kind of biological network. If they destroyed that command node, the entire Vrex fleet would be crippled, but reaching it would be almost impossible. Hundreds of Vrex ships surrounded the node, forming a living shield. Any attack would have to go through all of them first. Chen called his senior officers to the bridge. He explained his plan. The Unity would charge straight at the command node, using its heavy armor to smash through the defensive line. At the last moment, they would launch every nuclear missile they had directly into the node. The explosion would destroy the Vrex brain and end the battle. There was one problem. The Unity would take massive damage during the charge. Maybe too much damage. The crew would have only seconds to evacuate before the missiles detonated. Some of them might not make it. Chen gave his officers a choice. They could follow him on this mission or leave the ship now. Nobody left. Every officer stayed at their post. They had come to save the Kalari. If this was what it took, then this was what they would do. The Unity turned toward the command node and accelerated. The fusion engines pushed the ship to maximum speed. Metal groaned under the stress. Alarms sounded throughout the ship. But the Unity kept moving faster and faster. Vrex ships tried to block their path. The Unity smashed through them like they were made of paper. The reinforced hull held, though barely. Explosions rocked the ship. Systems failed. Fires broke out. But the Unity kept going. A spear aimed at the heart of the enemy. On the ground, the human Marines saw a new star appear in the sky. Lieutenant Kate Morgan looked up and knew what it meant. The Unity was making its final attack. She said a silent prayer for Admiral Chen and his crew. In space, the Unity reached the command node. Chen gave the order to launch missiles. Every nuclear weapon on the ship fired at once, streaking toward the massive organic brain. Then Chen ordered everyone to the escape pods. The crew ran through damaged corridors, dodging fires and jumping over holes in the floor. They reached the escape pods and launched. Chen was the last person off the ship. As his pod accelerated away, he took one last look at the Unity. The ship had served them well. The nuclear missiles hit the command node and detonated. The explosion was so bright it could be seen from the planet's surface. A miniature sun bloomed in space, vaporizing the command node and everything around it. The blast wave spread outward, destroying dozens of Vrex ships. The effect on the Vrex fleet was immediate. Without the command node coordinating them, the bioships lost all organization. They stopped moving in patterns. They stopped working together. Some ships started attacking other Vrex ships, their hive mind broken and confused. Within minutes, the battle in space was over. The surviving Vrex ships fled the system, their green lights fading as they disappeared into deep space. The threat was gone. On the planet, the Vrex ground forces simply stopped moving. Without commands from the fleet above, they stood motionless like statues. The human Marines did not hesitate. They went through the city methodically, eliminating every remaining Vrex warrior. They took no chances. Every enemy had to die to make sure the Kalari were safe. Sergeant Ryan Torres found Coordinator Veln in the ruins of the Planetary Command Center. The Kalari leader was injured and exhausted, but alive. When Veln saw Torres, they collapsed in relief. Tears ran down their face as they realized the impossible had happened. They had survived. The Vrex were defeated. Torres helped Veln stand up. Through his translator, he told the Kalari leader that the city was secure. The enemy was gone. The planet was saved. Veln could barely speak. They simply hugged Torres, crying tears of joy and gratitude. All across the planet, Kalari emerged from hiding. They looked at the sky and saw that the Vrex ships were gone. They saw human Marines standing guard in their streets. They realized that the nightmare was over. They had been saved by aliens from a distant world, aliens who had answered their desperate call for help. The Kalari began to celebrate. They sang songs of joy. They embraced each other. They thanked every human they saw. Many could not stop crying, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. Lieutenant Kate Morgan sat on a pile of rubble watching the celebration. She was exhausted. Her armor was damaged. Her rifle needed cleaning, but she smiled. They had done it. They had crossed the galaxy and saved an entire species from extinction. Trell, the young Kalari soldier, approached her carefully. He sat down beside her without speaking. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the damaged city. In the distance, fire still burned, but they would be put out. Buildings had fallen, but they would be rebuilt. The Kalari had survived, and that was all that mattered. Finally, Trell spoke. He asked Kate if humans fought like this often. Kate thought about the question. She explained that humans had fought each other for thousands of years. Wars over land, resources, beliefs, everything imaginable. But this was different. This was the first time humanity had fought to save another species. It felt good. It felt right. Trell nodded slowly. He said that the Kalari would never forget what humanity had done. They would tell this story for generations. The story of how the Deathworlders came to save them. Kate smiled and stood up. There was still work to do. Wounded to help. Areas to secure. A planet to rebuild. But for now they had won. And that was enough. The cleanup took weeks. Human engineers worked alongside Kalari technicians to repair damaged buildings and restore power to the cities. Medical teams treated thousands of wounded civilians. Search and rescue operations pulled survivors from collapsed structures. It was exhausting work, but nobody complained. Saving the Kalari meant more than just winning a battle. It meant helping them rebuild. Admiral Victor Chen and the crew of the Unity were rescued by Kalari ships. The escape pods had scattered across the system, but every single person was found alive. When Chen finally stood on solid ground again, Coordinator Veln was there to greet him. The Kalari leader embraced Chen, calling him a hero. Chen felt uncomfortable with the praise. He had just done what needed to be done. Veln took Chen to see the wreckage of the Unity. The ship was gone, destroyed in the nuclear blast that had saved the planet. Only scattered pieces of metal remained floating in orbit. Chen felt sad looking at the debris. The Unity had been a good ship. It deserved better than this. But it had died protecting others, and that was an honorable end. Lieutenant Kate Morgan spent her time training Kalari volunteers. The Vrex were gone, but the galaxy was clearly dangerous. The Kalari needed to learn how to defend themselves. Kate taught them basic combat tactics, how to hold a weapon properly, how to aim, how to move under fire, how to work as a team. The Kalari students struggled with concepts that came naturally to humans. Aggression, quick decisions, the willingness to hurt another living being. The Kalari had spent hundreds of years building a peaceful society. Violence was foreign to them. But Kate was patient. She explained that violence was not good, but sometimes it was necessary. The key was knowing when to use it and when not to. Trell was one of her best students. The young Kalari had fought alongside the humans during the battle, and that experience had changed him. He understood now that peace was precious, but it needed to be protected. Sometimes protection required force. It was a hard lesson, but an important one. Dr. Amy Phillips established a joint medical program with Kalari doctors. The Kalari had advanced knowledge of biology and genetics. Humans had centuries of experience treating injuries and trauma. Together, They could save lives that neither could save alone. Amy spent long days sharing techniques and learning from her Kalari colleagues. The exchange of knowledge was exciting and rewarding. One day, a young Kalari doctor named Mira asked Amy a question. Why had humans come to help? Earth was so far away. The Kalari were complete strangers. What did humanity gain from this? Amy thought carefully before answering. She explained that humans had learned something important during their long history. Everyone was stronger when they helped each other. Alone, people were weak. Together, they were strong. The Kalari had needed help and humans could provide that help. It was really that simple. Mira seemed satisfied with this answer. The Kalari believed in cooperation and mutual support. Apparently, so did humans, even if they expressed it differently. Sergeant Ryan Torres helped clear unexploded ordnance from the cities. Bombs, missiles, and grenades that had not detonated needed to be found and safely removed. It was dangerous work. One mistake could kill everyone nearby. But Torres was an expert. He had done this type of work on Mars and in the asteroid belt. He knew what he was doing. Kalari engineers watched him work with fascination. Torres moved with confidence and precision, treating each explosive with respect but no fear. When a young engineer asked if he was scared, Torres laughed. Of course he was scared. Anyone who worked with explosives and was not scared was an idiot. But fear was useful. It made you careful. It kept you alive. 4 weeks after the battle, Coordinator Veln called a meeting with Admiral Chen and Commander Jake Harrison. Veln wanted to thank humanity properly. Words were not enough for what the humans had done. The Kalari wanted to give something in return. Veln offered humanity access to Kalari technology. The Morrison drive had worked, but it was experimental and dangerous. The Kalari had proper faster-than-light engines that were safe and reliable. With Kalari FTL technology, humans could explore the galaxy freely. They could visit other worlds. They could make new friends. The universe would be open to them. Chen was stunned. The technology Veln was offering was worth more than money could measure. It would change humanity forever. He tried to refuse, saying that humans had not come for payment. They had come to help. But Veln insisted. The Kalari would have been extinct without human intervention. No amount of technology could repay that debt, but it was a start. Veln also offered something else. The Kalari would introduce humanity to other peaceful species in the galaxy. There was an informal alliance of civilizations that valued peace and cooperation. The Kalari would sponsor humanity's membership in this alliance. Earth would no longer be alone in the universe. Chen accepted on behalf of Earth. It was more than generous. It was life-changing. Humanity had made first contact by answering a distress call, and now they were being welcomed into a galactic community. The news reached Earth a few days later. The entire planet celebrated. Humanity was no longer alone. They had friends among the stars. They had proven themselves as protectors, not conquerors. The future looked brighter than ever before. But not everyone in the galaxy was happy about humanity's arrival. The news spread quickly through the network of civilizations. Most species were curious or welcoming. Some were cautious. A few were worried. These Deathworlders were incredibly skilled at warfare. What would happen if they decided to use those skills for conquest instead of protection? On a distant world, a council of alien leaders met to discuss the human situation. They represented various species, all concerned about this new player in galactic politics. One representative, a being named Korth from a warrior culture, argued that humanity should be monitored closely. Any species that could defeat the Vrek so decisively was potentially very dangerous. Another representative, a peaceful species called the Arene, disagreed. The humans had traveled across the galaxy to save strangers. They had sacrificed their ship and risked their lives for people they had never met. Those were not the actions of conquerors. Those were the actions of heroes. The debate continued for hours. Finally, they agreed to take a wait-and-see approach. Humanity would be welcomed into the galactic community but watched carefully. Time would tell what kind of neighbors the Deathworlders would be. On Kalara Prime, preparations began for the human departure. The Marines would return to Earth as heroes. A fleet of Kalari ships had been prepared to carry them home. The journey would take only a few days with proper FTL technology, much faster than the 16-day trip the Unity had endured. Commander Harrison stood at the landing pad, watching his soldiers prepare to board. They looked different than when they arrived. More experienced, more confident. They had fought in humanity's first interstellar war and won. More importantly, they had saved billions of lives. That was something to be proud of. Lieutenant Kate Morgan said goodbye to her Kalari students. She gave each of them advice for continuing their training. Stay alert, practice regularly, work together. Most importantly, remember that weapons were tools for protection, not for aggression. Use them wisely. Trell hugged Kate, which surprised her. The Kalari had been so formal when the humans first arrived. Now they treated the Marines like family. Trell thanked her for everything, not just for fighting, but for teaching him that peace was worth defending. Kate smiled and told him to stay safe. Then she boarded her ship. Dr. Amy Phillips left detailed medical protocols with her Kalari colleagues. She also left behind medical supplies and equipment that the Kalari needed more than Earth did. Mira hugged her and promised to continue their work. Amy promised to send more information once she returned to Earth. This was not goodbye. This was see you later. Sergeant Ryan Torres took one last look at the city. When they arrived, it had been burning. Now it was recovering. Kalari workers were rebuilding homes and businesses. Children played in the streets again. Life was returning to normal. Torres felt satisfied. They had done good work here. Admiral Chen was the last to board. Coordinator Velen walked with him to the ship, talking quietly. Velen asked if humans would come back to visit. Chen smiled and said absolutely. Earth and Kalara Prime were friends now. Friends visited each other. Velen gave Chen a gift before he left. It was a crystal sculpture, traditional Kalari art. The sculpture showed two figures standing together, one human and one Kalari, facing outward as if watching for danger. Velen explained that the sculpture represented their alliance. Different species, but united in protecting each other. Chen accepted the gift gratefully. He promised that humanity would honor this alliance. If the Kalari ever needed help again, Earth would answer. Velen knew he meant it. The ships launched, carrying 300 human soldiers back toward Earth. As they left orbit, the crew looked down at Kalara Prime one last time. The planet was beautiful and now it was safe. They had done that. They had made a difference. The journey home was quiet. People slept, read, or simply stared out the windows at the stars. They were going home as heroes, but they did not feel like heroes. They had just done what needed to be done. That was what humans did. When someone called for help, humans answered. The return to Earth was triumphant. News of the mission's success had arrived days before the ships did. Every major city on the planet held celebrations. When the transport vessels entered Earth orbit, they were greeted by dozens of ships from every nation, all firing their engines in salute. The landing was broadcast live around the world. Billions of people watched as the Marines stepped off their ships and onto solid ground. They were tired and worn, but they walked with pride. They had represented humanity in its first contact with alien life, and they had done so with honor. Admiral Victor Chen was met by the President herself. She shook his hand and thanked him for his service. Chen felt overwhelmed by the attention. He tried to explain that he had just done his job, but nobody wanted to hear that. To the world, he and his crew were heroes who had saved an entire civilization. Lieutenant Kate Morgan found herself surrounded by reporters. They all wanted to know what it was like to fight aliens. What did the Vrex look like up close? Was she scared? How many enemies had she killed? Kate answered their questions politely but briefly. She did not like talking about the killing. That was not the important part of the story. The important part was that the Kalari had survived. Sergeant Ryan Torres reunited with his family. His wife and children ran to him, crying and laughing at the same time. They had watched the news every day, terrified that they might hear bad news. But he had come home safe. Torres hugged them all tightly and promised never to leave for that long again. Though even as he said it, he knew that if another distress call came, he would answer it. Dr. Amy Phillips returned to her work immediately. She had brought back data on Kalari biology and medicine. Combined with human knowledge, it could lead to breakthroughs in treating diseases and injuries. She assembled a team of researchers to study everything she had learned. The cooperation between human and Kalari science had only just begun. The Kalari technology arrived 3 weeks later. A Kalari ship delivered the FTL engine designs and manufacturing instructions. Human engineers studied the technology with excitement. It was elegant and efficient, far more advanced than the experimental Morrison drive. Within a year, Earth would have its own fleet of FTL-capable ships. But the FTL technology was just the beginning. The Kalari also shared their knowledge of other alien species. The galaxy was full of intelligent life. Hundreds of civilizations existed, each with their own cultures, technologies, and philosophies. Most were peaceful, some were aggressive. A few, like the Vreks, were actively dangerous. Earth received its first diplomatic contact from another species 2 months after the mission. The Arene, a peaceful aquatic race, sent a message welcoming humanity to the galactic community. They praised Earth's actions in defending the Kalari and offered to establish trade relations. The president accepted immediately. Earth would have its first alien embassy within the year. Not all the responses were positive. Some species were wary of humanity. They had heard the stories of what humans did to the Vreks. Any species that could fight that effectively was potentially very dangerous. These species chose to watch and wait, seeing what humanity would do next. A few species sent warnings. They reminded humanity that the galaxy had rules. Species that caused trouble faced consequences. The fact that humans came from a death world did not give them permission to act like barbarians. Humanity needed to prove they could be responsible members of galactic society. The United Nations established a new department to handle alien relations. They chose diplomats carefully, looking for people who could represent humanity's best qualities. Understanding, compassion, cooperation, strength when necessary, but always tempered with wisdom. Dr. Sarah Blake became the director of the FTL research program. Her experimental Morrison drive had worked, but it had nearly destroyed the Unity. The Kalari technology was better, but Sarah wanted to understand it completely. She assembled the best physicists on Earth to study how the drives worked. Maybe they could even improve the design. Commander Jake Harrison was promoted to general. He was put in charge of training a new force called the Galactic Response Team. If another species sent a distress call, Earth would be ready to respond. The team would be larger than the 300 who went to Kalara Prime. Better equipped. Better trained. Ready for anything. Volunteers flooded in. Thousands of soldiers wanted to be part of the team. They had seen what the first mission accomplished, and they wanted to be part of something greater than themselves. Harrison interviewed every applicant personally. He was looking for specific qualities. Skill was important, but character was more important. These soldiers would represent humanity across the galaxy. They needed to be the best. 6 months after returning from Kalara Prime, Lieutenant Kate Morgan received a message. It was from Trell, the young Kalari soldier she had trained. He wanted to update her on how things were going on his homeworld. The cities were mostly rebuilt. The Kalari had established a proper military for the first time in their history. They would never be as skilled at warfare as humans, but they could defend themselves now if needed. Trell also mentioned something interesting. Other species had contacted the Kalari asking about humanity. They wanted to know what kind of people the humans were. Were they aggressive? Were they trustworthy? Would they help others the way they had helped the Kalari? Trell had told them the truth. Humans were warriors, yes. They were incredibly skilled at combat. But they were also compassionate. They risked their lives to save strangers. They kept their promises. They could be trusted. Trell had ended his message by saying that the Kalari would always be grateful to humanity. They would always be friends. Kate smiled as she read the message. She wrote back immediately, updating Trell on events on Earth. She also promised to visit Kalara Prime someday. She wanted to see how the planet had recovered. Maybe in a few years, when things were more settled, she would take a vacation. It would be nice to see Trell and the others again. 1 year after the mission, Admiral Chen stood in a new building in Geneva. It was called the Galactic Affairs Center, and it coordinated all of Earth's interactions with alien species. The building housed diplomats, translators, scientists, and military advisors. It was humanity's window to the galaxy. Chen had been asked to give a speech about the Kalari mission. He stood at a podium, looking at an audience filled with important people from every nation on Earth. He spoke about the mission, about the challenges they faced, about the sacrifices made. But mostly he spoke about what the mission meant for humanity's future. For thousands of years, Chen explained, humans had fought each other. Wars over land, resources, beliefs, power. Humanity had become very good at warfare through all that fighting. But now they had a chance to use those skills differently. Not to conquer, but to protect. Not to destroy, but to defend. Not to take, but to give. The Kalari had sent a distress call and Earth had answered. That set a precedent. From now on, when peaceful species faced extinction, they would know they could call on humanity for help. Earth would become known as the planet that protected others. The death world that produced defenders, not destroyers. This was a responsibility, Chen said. A heavy one. It meant humanity had to live up to high standards. They had to prove again and again that they deserved the trust other species placed in them. It would not be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. The audience applauded when Chen finished, but he barely heard it. He was thinking about the future, about the ships being built in orbit, about the soldiers training to be humanity's representatives, about the galaxy waiting beyond Earth's solar system. Somewhere out there, another species might be in danger. Another distress call might be sent. And when it came, Earth would be ready to answer. Construction had already begun on a new fleet. Not warships designed for conquest, but defenders built to answer calls for help. They would carry the same message that the Unity had delivered to Kalara Prime. Help is coming. The Deathworlders are on their way. The ships would be faster than the Unity, better armed, more durable. They would carry larger crews and more supplies. Humanity was learning from the first mission and preparing for the next one. Dr. Lisa Grant, the xenobiologist who had briefed the crew before the mission, was now studying reports from dozens of alien species. Each one was unique. Different biology, different culture, different needs. But they all had one thing in common. They all wanted to survive. Grant believed that humanity's role in the galaxy would be crucial. Most species were either too peaceful to defend themselves effectively or too aggressive to be trusted. Humans were in between, capable of extreme violence when necessary, but also capable of great compassion. It was a rare combination, and it might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The President addressed the United Nations General Assembly on the anniversary of the mission. She spoke about humanity's new place in the universe, about the responsibilities that came with being a Death World species, about the importance of using strength to protect the weak rather than to dominate them. She also announced a new initiative. Earth would establish the Galactic Protection Fleet. Any peaceful species facing an existential threat could request assistance. Earth would evaluate each request and respond if possible. It would not be easy. It would be expensive. It would be... 5 years passed since the mission to Kalara Prime. Those 5 years changed everything for humanity. Earth was no longer isolated. Ships traveled between Earth and dozens of alien worlds every day. Human diplomats worked in alien embassies. Alien tourists visited Earth to see the famous Death World. Trade flourished. Knowledge was exchanged. The galaxy had opened up in ways nobody had imagined possible. The Galactic Protection Fleet had grown to 12 ships. Each one was named after a virtue that humanity valued. The courage, the honor, the justice, the mercy. They patrolled the trade routes, responded to distress calls, and protected peaceful species from threats. In 5 years, they had answered 17 calls for help. Not all missions were as dramatic as the Kalari rescue, but each one mattered. Lieutenant Kate Morgan, now promoted to captain, commanded one of the ships called the Vigilance. Her crew was mixed, with both humans and aliens working together. She had a Kalari weapons officer named Trell. Yes, the same Trell she had trained 5 years ago. He had joined the protection fleet specifically to serve with her. His shooting had improved dramatically, though Kate joked that he still had a lot to learn. The Vigilance was currently patrolling near a system inhabited by the Solon, a peaceful insectoid species. Not all insects were hostile like the Vrex. The Solon were farmers and artists, completely harmless. But their system was close to dangerous space where pirates operated. The protection fleet maintained a presence to keep the pirates away. One morning, Kate received an urgent message. A Solon colony ship had been attacked by pirates. The ship was damaged and drifting. They had injured people on board and limited supplies. They needed help immediately. Kate did not hesitate. She ordered the Vigilance to maximum speed and contacted the other protection fleet ships in the area. The Vigilance reached the colony ship within 3 hours. The damage was severe. Pirates had hit the engines and life support systems. The Solon crew was trying to make repairs, but they did not have the right equipment. Kate sent over engineering teams immediately. Human and Kalari engineers worked together. patching holes and restoring power. Dr. Amy Phillips, now the chief medical officer for the entire protection fleet, had trained the medical team on the Vigilance. They treated the injured Solon with skill and compassion. The Solon were grateful but also amazed. They had heard stories about humans and their Deathworld origins. Seeing them work up close was different than hearing stories. These humans were genuinely kind, despite their reputation as fierce warriors. While the repairs continued, Kate tracked the pirates. They had fled after attacking the colony ship, but they left a trail. Kate followed it to a small moon where the pirates had a hidden base. She contacted General Jake Harrison, who was now in charge of all protection fleet operations. She asked for permission to raid the base. Harrison approved immediately. Pirates were a plague on peaceful trade. Every base destroyed meant safer space for everyone. Kate assembled a strike team, including Trell and several other experienced soldiers. They dropped to the moon's surface under cover of darkness. The pirate base was poorly defended. These criminals were used to attacking weak targets, not fighting real soldiers. Kate's team moved through the base like shadows, taking out guards silently. When they reached the main complex, they gave the pirates one chance to surrender. Most did, a few tried to fight. Those few regretted it quickly. The raid was over in 20 minutes. No protection fleet casualties. 37 pirates captured. The base was destroyed and the stolen goods were recovered. Kate sent a report to Harrison, who congratulated her on a clean operation. Another threat eliminated. Another group of innocents protected. The Solon colony ship was repaired and continued its journey. The captain sent Kate a message thanking her and her crew. The captain also said something interesting. Word was spreading across the galaxy about the humans and their protection fleet. Species that had lived in fear were starting to feel safe again. The mere presence of human ships was enough to deter most threats. Kate thought about that. 5 years ago, humanity had been unknown. Now they were becoming a symbol of protection and justice. It was a big responsibility, but one that humanity seemed willing to carry. Back on Earth, Admiral Victor Chen had retired from active duty. He now taught at the new Galactic Affairs Academy, training the next generation of officers who would command protection fleet ships. His students came from all over Earth and from several alien species, too. Chen believed strongly in cooperation between species. The more they worked together, the safer everyone would be. One of Chen's students was a young woman named Maya Foster. She was brilliant, driven, and absolutely determined to command a protection fleet ship someday. Chen saw a lot of his younger self in her. She asked difficult questions. She challenged assumptions. She always wanted to know the why behind every decision. During one class, Maya asked Chen a question. Why did humanity take on this role? Earth had its own problems. Poverty, disease, environmental challenges. Why spend resources helping aliens when humans still needed help? Chen smiled. It was a good question. He explained that helping others and helping yourself were not opposites. They were connected. By protecting other species, humanity made the galaxy safer for everyone, including themselves. By building alliances, Earth gained friends and trading partners. By proving they could be trusted, humans earned respect and cooperation. But more than that, Chen said, it was simply the right thing to do. Humans had the ability to help. They had the strength, the technology, the will. When someone was in danger and you could help them, you had a moral obligation to do so. That was what separated civilization from barbarism. Maya seemed satisfied with this answer. She later graduated at the top of her class and was assigned to the Justice as a tactical officer. Chen was proud of her and all his students. They represented humanity's future among the stars. On Kalara Prime, Coordinator Velen had become an important figure in galactic politics. The Kalari were respected for their scientific knowledge and artistic achievements. But now they were also respected for their courage in rebuilding after the Vrex invasion. Velen often spoke about the debt the Kalari owed to humanity. Never again would they stand by while others suffered as they had suffered. The Kalari had contributed 3 ships to the protection fleet. They were not warships, but support vessels. Medical ships, engineering ships, supply ships. The Kalari would never be great warriors, but they could support those who fought. It was their way of giving back. Other species had joined the protection fleet too. The Arene provided diplomats who could negotiate with hostile groups. The Krell, a strong species adapted to high gravity, served as excellent marines. The IRIX, with their incredible eyesight, worked as scouts and intelligence officers. The fleet had become truly multi-species, representing the best that galactic civilization had to offer, but humans remained the core. They were the founders, the leaders, the ones with the most experience in warfare. Other species contributed, but they looked to humanity for guidance. It was a role humanity had not asked for, but one they accepted with humility and determination. Not every species approved. Some still viewed humans with suspicion. These Deathworlders were too violent, too aggressive, too dangerous. What would happen if they decided to use their military might for conquest instead of protection? The concern was understandable, even if it was unfounded. To address these concerns, Earth established the Galactic Ethics Committee. Representatives from multiple species reviewed every protection fleet action to ensure it was justified and proportional. The committee had the power to investigate complaints and recommend changes. It was not perfect, but it provided accountability and transparency. Dr. Sarah Blake, who had designed the original Morrison drive, had continued her work on FTL technology. She was now working on something revolutionary: instantaneous communication across any distance. If successful, it would allow ships to coordinate perfectly no matter how far apart they were. The protection fleet would become even more effective. Sergeant Ryan Torres had retired from active duty after serving 3 more missions. He now ran a training facility where he taught combat skills to protection fleet recruits. His methods were tough but fair. He demanded excellence from his students because their lives would depend on their skills. Many graduates credited Torres with preparing them for the harsh realities of space combat. One evening, Torres received a visit from a young recruit who was struggling. The recruit was from a peaceful species and found it difficult to embrace the warrior mindset necessary for combat. Torres sat with the recruit and explained something important. Being a warrior was not about wanting to fight. It was about being willing to fight when necessary to protect others. The best warriors were those who understood the cost of violence and used it only as a last resort. The recruit thanked Torres and returned to training with renewed determination. Torres watched them go, thinking about how much had changed. 5 years ago, humans had been alone. Now they were training aliens to fight alongside them. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. The galaxy was not perfect. Threats still existed: pirates, slavers, rogue factions, and worse. But the galaxy was safer than it had been. The protection fleet made sure of that. And at the heart of